This is a war, but it's not the special military operation Putin described to the Russian people on television. Putin wanted to plunge Ukraine into darkness. Now his own cities are plunged into darkness.
I think the Ukrainians have developed or refined their theory of victory by going after Russia's oil and gas infrastructure.
November 2nd, 2025, midnight. The operation began like a firestorm. Southern and western Russia were shaken by a simultaneous wave of drone attacks. The peak of this chaos was experienced hundreds of kilometers to the south, at the port of Tuapse. What you see is the moment Putin's wallet is burning. This is one of Russia's largest oil terminals on the Black Sea. It is the main southern gateway for Russian crude oil and refined products to reach international markets. And right now, as you can see, it is engulfed in flames. So, do you know how Russian officials, the Krasnodar administration, explained this massive fire, this strategic disaster to the public? What did officials tell Reuters? At the Tuapse port, parts of a drone fell onto an oil tanker, damaging the deck superstructure. The parts fell. Really? Now I'm showing you those images again. Look closely. Does this look like damage caused by fallen parts to you? Or is this a direct, surgical strike on billions of dollars worth of infrastructure and an oil tanker? Is the Russian people forced to believe this ridiculous lie from their leaders? With a port burning before our eyes, the "parts fell" explanation proves how incapable the Putin regime is of telling its own people the truth. When they say pieces, eyewitnesses and residents of Tuapse reported hearing at least 13 explosions in the sky and seeing air defenses desperately trying to hit new targets. This was not a piece of a single drone. This was a coordinated swarm attack. So, how critical was the target? This was no ordinary port. This was the deep water pier complex known as RN Morskoy Terminal Tuapse LLC, controlled by Putin's state oil company Rosneft. The tactical strike was this. Open source intelligence, OSINT, analysts confirmed that the location hit was the number 1 pier. Number 1 pier, do you know what that means? This is the point where diesel, gasoline, and other petroleum products are loaded directly onto tankers. In other words, the heart of exports. The attack triggered a chain reaction. Not only the pier, but a petroleum tanker anchored in the port also caught fire. Its superstructure was damaged and the crew was evacuated. The attack was so successful and so destructive that even the American space agency NASA recorded this fire. This is not propaganda, not maybe. This is NASA's thermal satellite image. Those huge red spots you see show the extent of the fire. It's not just one spot. The entire port is burning. A local Telegram channel analyzed this NASA data and reported that the fires were also at Piers 3 and 4, and that both a tanker and a terminal were burning. So, the Russian authorities' lie that parts fell, there is minor damage, is refuted by objective data coming directly from space. But this was not the only attack that night. This was only the brightest, most fiery part of the picture. While Tuapse was being hit, hundreds of kilometers to the north, in Russia's interior, other targets were also being hit. Look at the map. This is not a scattered attack. This is a coordinated attack designed to cripple Russia's energy infrastructure. What happened in different parts of Russia on the same night that Tuapse was burning? The first parallel attack took place in the city of Zheleznogorsk in the Kursk region. On the evening of November 1st, it was hit by drones. The target was a transformer station. The result? Part of the city was left completely without electricity. The second parallel attack took place in Alchevsk, Luhansk, which is under Russian control. So it's not just Russia. Even the regions that Putin claims to have come to rescue are caught up in this chaos. Again, a transformer station. The result? A power outage in the city. Other parallel attacks took place in Oryol and Lipetsk. The city of Oryol was also hit by a drone attack. Remember? The thermal power plant in Oryol was hit just the day before. Now, last night, it was hit again. And then, Lipetsk, the 500 kilovolt Lipetskaya transformer station. In other words, one of Russia's main high-voltage lines. Looking at the bigger picture, the events of the night of November 2nd clearly demonstrate the level of sophistication that Ukraine's asymmetric warfare has reached. Kiev is outmaneuvering Russia on its own turf, by its own rules, using relatively inexpensive, smart, and long-range UAVs against costly and cumbersome Russian military assets. This strategy has now evolved into a two-pronged and perfectly complementary asymmetric strangulation strategy. Tuapse, Zheleznogorsk, Alchevsk, Oryol, Lipetsk. 5 different regions, one night, one strategy. Logistical strangulation and collapsing the home front. By striking critical export terminals, oil refineries, and tankers like Tuapse, it is cutting off Russia's foreign exchange earnings, its economic lifeline. The fuel of war is money, and Ukraine is systematically drying up its source. By striking transformer stations in inland areas such as Zheleznogorsk, Oryol, and Lipetsk, it is demoralizing the civilian population, creating panic, and undermining confidence in the regime. It is bringing the message, war is at your doorstep, right into the living rooms of Russia's most protected cities. To understand why this attack is so important, we must grasp that this is not a terrorist attack, but a military economic murder. The strike on Pier No. 1 inch directly hit the terminal's capacity to load dark and light petroleum products onto tankers. The damage to the port facilities brought all operations to a standstill. This means that one of Russia's most important export valves in the south has been shut off. The attack represents a loss of billions of dollars in revenue, not only for Rosneft, but also for the Russian state budget. The money for the missiles Putin used to bomb Ukraine came from the oil that passed through this port. It will no longer come. At the same time, the targeting of transformer stations in Zheleznogorsk, Alchevsk, Oryol, and Lipetsk has targeted civilian life. Cities left without electricity, infrastructure like water pumps and heating not functioning, and communication disruptions. All these factors are the fulfillment of Ukrainian commander Madyar's promise of a blackout in Russia. In other words, the nightmare Putin inflicted on the Ukrainian people is now coming back to haunt his own people. This attack did not only hit the Russian state, it is a direct slap in the face to Putin's inner circle, to one of his most powerful men, Rosneft CEO Igor Sechin. The Tuapse terminal is one of the most important jewels in Sechin's personal kingdom, the Rosneft empire. Rosneft is the main company financing Russia's budget, and consequently, the war. Sechin promised Putin security and stable income. However, since January 2024, he has been unable to protect the multi-billion-dollar facility in Tuapse. This latest attack destroyed not only the refinery, but also the export pier, striking not only Sechin's production, but also his ability to sell. This shows Sechin's shaky position with Putin. Putin is seeing how even his most trusted man is helpless against relatively cheap Ukrainian drones. This is also a crisis that will prompt questions within the Kremlin, such as, how are we managing this war? And, Sechin, why can't you protect our facilities? And is a moment when Putin is confronted with the incompetence of his own allies. Furthermore, this attack once again proves how vulnerable the Black Sea coast and southern Russia, which Putin presented as impregnable, really are. But this is not just a defensive weakness. It is part of a much more cunning strategy. Now we must ask the question, why did Ukraine strike a heavily guarded strategic target like Tuapse, while at the same time striking transformer stations in Zheleznogorsk, Oryol, and Lipetsk, hundreds of kilometers to the north? To disturb civilians? Number. This is a military strategy. The 500 kilovolt Lipetskaya transformer station in Lipetsk, the transformer station in Zheleznogorsk, these don't just provide light to your homes. They are the main power grids that supply military facilities, command centers, and most importantly, air defense radars in those regions. Ukraine's strategy generally proceeded as follows. First, by striking the substations in Kursk and Oryol, it crippled the grid that powered the S-400 and Pantsir batteries in those regions. Second, the radar systems, left without power, could no longer detect the approaching swarm of UAVs or were forced to switch to backup generators, reducing their capacity. Third, it created massive blind spots, or corridors, in Russian air defenses. Finally, it safely moved its main attack force through those blind corridors. In other words, the blackout that occurred in Kursk and Lipetsk that night was not just to create civilian chaos. It was a supporting military operation that opened the way to the billion-dollar oil port in Tuapse. This is an asymmetric genius that shows Russia cannot protect its thousands of kilometers of borders and hundreds of energy facilities at the same time. Ukraine is waging an asymmetric war using cheap drones against expensive missiles, and this strategy is crippling Putin's entire system. Putin's dilemma is this: how will he stop these attacks? Billions of dollars worth of air defense systems are not enough to protect thousands of kilometers of border and hundreds of energy facilities. Every drone attack exacts a heavy economic and psychological toll on Russia. Kiev clearly states that these attacks are a retaliation for Russia's attacks on Ukraine's energy grid. When Putin tried to plunge Ukraine into darkness on October 30th, he threw a boomerang. On November 2nd, that boomerang struck the oil terminal in Tuapse and the transformer station in Kursk. So, as Putin tries to plunge Ukraine into darkness, he is forced to watch his own cities and critical export ports also be plunged into darkness. The effects of this attack will not be limited to Tuapse. It will create a global ripple effect. The attack on a major export terminal like Tuapse and the tanker catching fire sent a single message to global oil markets and insurance companies: Russian ports are not safe. The Russian Black Sea Fleet, seen as the undisputed ruler of the Black Sea at the start of the war and a symbol of Putin's power in Crimea, has been systematically hunted down and dragged into a grueling war of attrition by a country with virtually no navy. One of the most surprising hits was the irreparable damage sustained by a Kilo-class submarine docked in a dry dock in Crimea. These attacks revealed that a total of more than 22 ships and boats were destroyed, while nearly 20 units were seriously damaged. The military revolution behind this unprecedented destruction is Ukraine's naval force without a navy strategy. Kiev used domestically produced unmanned naval vehicles, which are very low cost but extremely effective, as its primary weapon against Russia's billion-dollar ships. In particular, the Madyar V5 and Sea Baby kamikaze drones, developed by the Ukrainian military intelligence and the SBU, radically changed the balance of power in the Black Sea. These drones, moving in swarms, managed to bypass Russian ships' defense systems and hit their targets with high accuracy. According to statements made by Vasyl Malyuk, director of Ukraine's SBU, in October 2025, these technological advances indicate that the operation to clear the Black Sea of the Russian fleet will continue. As of today, the status of the Russian Black Sea Fleet can be described as defensive and elusive, rather than operational. The fleet was forced to effectively abandon Sevastopol in Crimea, its main base for over 200 years. Under constant missile and drone threat, this port has turned from a fortress into a trap. Satellite imagery and military analysis confirm that the fleet's main combat elements, including caliber missile carriers such as Admiral Grigorovich-class frigates, have been withdrawn to the much more eastern port of Novorossiysk, located on Russia's mainland. There are even reports that some ships have sought refuge further south, at the port of Ochemchira in Georgia's Abkhazia region. So, what happens next? Three options present themselves. The first option is that insurance premiums will skyrocket for any oil tanker heading to any Russian port in the Black Sea, not just Tuapse, but Novorossiysk as well. The second option is that many tanker owners will not want to risk their ships and crews and will refuse to transport Russian oil. The third and final option is that Russia's main customers, China and India, will now view Russia as an unreliable supplier. After all, who wants to be dependent on oil that is constantly interrupted and whose delivery is not guaranteed? So this attack did not just burn the oil in Tuapse. It also burned Putin's future oil contracts and his credibility in the global market. This attack also emerged as the culmination of Ukraine's logistics stranglehold and economic trap strategy. Consequently, what burned in Tuapse on the night of November 2nd was not just an oil tanker and a pier. It was Russia's myth of being an energy superpower and its economic lifeline. Ukraine brought the war to Russia's most vulnerable point, the heart of its economy. The flames in Tuapse turned Rosneft's and Igor Sechin's billion-dollar export contract to ashes, while the darkness in Kursk and Oryol is making the Russian people pay the price of war directly. Putin's lie that the pieces fell is melting away in the face of these images of fire and darkness suffered by his own citizens. Putin's southern stronghold has fallen, the export gateway has been paralyzed, and Russia is now burning in its own ports with the fire of the war it started. So, what do you think about this? Please share your thoughts in the comments. To stay updated on new videos, please subscribe to our channel and don't forget to turn on notifications. Thank you for choosing us.